In theory, we're working again. Hello, everyone. It's Thursday, which means the open source team, which are these wonderful people either side of me, Dan, Keith, Alex, and Will, are going to do some work, and you're going to watch. We work on a bunch of open source tools, including Syft and Grype, which are these two mascots you see on the screen. All our work is over on GitHub. If you go to github.com/Anchore, you'll find everything under here, all the open source projects. And we do this every Thursday. Should we just crack on? Anyone got anything to open with?
No topics here.
Okay. We could look for any issues that have needs discussion, and this one, two issues that are which surprised me slightly. Have we discussed these before? Let me just have a look. If they're Will 2 weeks ago. I don't think we have discussed this, have we?
I don't think so.
Okay, so let's dive in. Grype 1732 for those following along. Sorry, Will.
Yeah. So this sort of false positive where I believe what happened is that is a fork of this jar, not hosted in Central, and that it claims to be fixed from this particular site. And we don't really have a great data source for it. So maybe this the easy thing to do would be to say, like, hey, just put in your Grype config. Don't care about this. Don't care about this particular issue affecting this particular package. But maybe there's some more hints about in my later comments about what we could do.
So this is a third-party repository, not related to the upstream maintainer of that particular jar, is that what I'm saying? But they don't necessarily have a security feed.
Yeah, I think if they don't have a security feed, that's easy. But it's interesting that let's see. So like Maven repository, one of the Maven repository front ends is affecting that. And then I suggested PRing to security advisories, because one of the great things about GitHub security advisories is that they take pull requests and you can just go try to fix sort of thing in the upstream. But GitHub accept it because they only accept versions from Maven Central. So this is sort of placeholder for what can we do about jars that aren't in Maven Central. I think the other class of jars that aren't in Maven Central, the Jenkins plugins is a big repository that's not in Maven Central. I think Atlassian hosts their own Maven repository for like their SDKs and stuff that's not in Maven Central. Anyway, I'm going to see if anybody who knows more about Java wants to talk for a second. And it could be that there's no good vulnerability feed for this data and we can't do much about it. But I wanted to revisit that question because she's been open for a little bit.
Well, I mean, I would say aside from the vulnerability feed itself, like I'm kind of more interested in like the artifact side purely. Like, is there anything in the packaging here that indicates that this is a fork, that this shouldn't be from Maven Central, like even a different versioning scheme or something? Do we know the answer to that question, or still kind of like,
yeah? Can we go to Maven? Were we just at that Maven repository link that I posted?
That's the one Keith posted.
There's one I posted in the issue.
Sorry.
And it's in. Yeah, it's in the 3 weeks ago comment there. So
gotcha. So this is not Central. This is just Maven repository. That kind of for. Hold up.
I think if we look at the versions, maybe I saw. So this is.
Well, here on this page, it's repositories. There's JBoss
right.
Party. Like has been said, it's Maven Central. It's
Right.
other repositories.
Right. And I think if you scroll down a little bit, maybe there's some, maybe it was one level up, but I saw a sort of list of versions and vulnerabilities. And you can sort of filter this by, like, if you hit boss repo, a tab at the top right now, you're looking at the central tab, you hit, like, there's also like the JBoss repo, which is a couple tabs over. And so it's kind of interesting to me because, like, whoever built this site thinks they have publicly available vulnerability data about these repositories. Because they have some kind of vulnerability data. So anyway, I just wondered, like, maybe, like, Keith, are you aware? Like, I think JBoss is a fairly large Maven repository, and maybe there's some security info over there. I don't know.
I mean, I definitely don't know anything about the security info that they may or may not have. But I mean, JBoss is very popular. So I would be kind of surprised if they're serving things and there's not be available through Red Hat. I think JBoss is a part of Red Hat. But I really don't know for sure.
I mean, it looks like
Yeah,
this.
one way to see this is if click on the JBoss third party tab. I think that's the one that's explicitly mentioned in the ticket. Isn't it JBoss org-6, right?
Yeah, that's attempting to find it. So it could be that,
right.
But
But if you go back to the Maven repository view and click on those two vulnerabilities, aren't those the two vulnerabilities that the user is saying are false positives?
Right.
So even
Maven,
this repository is saying that this jar is vulnerable to those things. So ever find where somebody is saying that version of the jar isn't vulnerable?
maybe one of the replies in the ticket bears.
If we
it says according to the wildfly community, right? Yeah.
Look at the CV, it looks like it affects like OpenGDK rather than some jar.
He also linked to a couple of commits in the source he's building from, or they did in their right. And so I think he's using these commits as evidence that are those even the same vulnerabilities he's mentioning?
24/7. No, wrong window. Sorry. Yeah, 2014-01-07. And the other one was 2022-34-169. 2022-34-169. Yeah, it's the same ones.
Right. And so, okay, I wonder if Wildfly is who we should be looking here. Anyway, okay, so maybe there's not really a great discussion to be had here, but it's go ahead, Alex.
The thing I'm actually still stuck on, because there's one side and the packaging side, and so somebody claiming that there's a distinction between this package and one's other repositories. I pull down the jar, open it, try to take a look, and like there's really, as far as I can tell so far, nothing that says this is any different than any of these other jars. And it's maybe like class policies says like I applied a patch, but they didn't. As far as I can tell, nobody updated any metadata that says this is like hosted in a spot, which would be odd in a jar if it said that. But they're also not saying that like there's a like plus metadata in the version indicating that something else has occurred to this. It's, this looks like a drop-in replacement for what would already be in the repository. So from a packaging perspective, it's truly invisible that this is some form.
Interesting.
So that's like one problem.
Did Syft find JBoss org-6 in the version? Or do you see it looking at the metadata? We do, because it's in the Grype output right there.
Yeah. Okay, so it's only in the version output. So but JBoss org doesn't know that means a different repo doesn't specifically mean that. I guess
I wonder if it would be worth looking and seeing if the Red Hat CSAF data has, because I think JBoss is a Red Hat product. So it might be worth looking and seeing if JBoss org has these CVEs in their CSAF. It might be worth investigating. I do find that version. It might be reasonable to say, hey, jars with .jboss.org in the version are special. That doesn't seem crazy because that's a really weird thing to put if you're not really. Okay.
Yeah.
I think this is more. Go ahead, Alex.
We think this is maybe like a Perl enhancement too. So where there's a repository qualifier that we could be putting on here when we detect the presence of a different repository. So in this case, that's kind of what we're saying, saying that the file name having jboss.org really means it's from this other repository. It sounds like a Perl update there to at least a hint downstream in Grype to say, hey, I've been told this is coming from somewhere else, thus searching GHSA for this is technically invalid. I mean, is that even right?
I mean, a lot of repositories are mirrors.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I mean, there could be the same.
Right. Yeah, that's what.
But it's the combination. This is kind of a perfect storm where I think the recommendation should be you're going to need to add this to your exclude list.
Yeah.
Right? Because as far as I can tell, we can't find any actual vulnerability source says JBoss-6 includes a fix for these CVEs. And B, we don't have a way to, and just from the local context, to your point, Alex, that we should be consulting said vulnerability source even if it did exist.
I think
reading this.
The only exception I'd take that is it's possible that the Red Hat CSAF data has some I know I've seen this string JBoss in those files, so I might move this from needs discussion to needs investigation and go see if it's possible to look for JBoss.org in jar versions and see whether there are fixes published from that source. I think that's the only thing we could do. But I think you're right that the advice to the user here is configure your local Grype to ignore this vulnerability because you are using a fork that you believe is patched and Grype doesn't know that.
That all sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Vmvn repository, one of the tabs is Red Hat GA as well. So it's also claiming that the 2.7.1 versions from Red Hat is also vulnerable. A different suffix.
Nice.
I am curious, does anybody have any idea where these vulnerabilities come from on this site? Alex raised a really good point when I said, oh, I see vulnerabilities here. Could they be using Grype to generate these?
Right. I kind of once I started seeing Grype get used more and more, I've now had to stop myself from saying, oh, good, the canonical source says X, when it could just be that if you lift up under the hood, it's using Grype or some similar technology. It's I don't know what they're using to source this, so I don't know if it's true.
Cool.
Well-
Are we done?
I think we've got a path forward. If nobody else, I can write up the answer unless somebody is already on it.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Sweet. Close the 1,000 tabs I've opened. And we had another one. Is that the, no, this is a different one. So this is Grype 1807. 1807, sorry. So another.
This is another one that I thought was interesting that maybe I'll change my mind
this-
once I actually
oh,
try to
okay.
talk about
It's been a bit of conversation. Okay.
Did whoever put needs discussion on it leave a like why they think it's worth discussing on it? Sometimes
That was Keith.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
What was this one? Sorry, I was writing the thing up. This is the JRuby versus CRuby thing. And Weston did mention something at the very end, which I think may be the answer. If you scroll all the way to the bottom,
Yeah, I was
there's-
just doing it really painfully slowly. Sorry.
that the GitHub is Ruby gems only.
all right.
Yeah, there is no packaging data to really distinguish this. I think he's right. So
Yeah, I think this is an interesting. It's worth just talking through what's happening here quickly and then moving on. So the poster here contends that this finding is a false positive because the JSON Ruby gem has a bug in its C native extensions that's considered a security vulnerability. But then he's using JRuby. So he doesn't have the C native extensions. He has the Java native extensions. Because when you're using JRuby, you don't use the C native extensions. You have a jar that's the native extensions. Yeah, so it's interesting. But I think this is like right now we can't tell that. And we'd have to do something very tenuous, like look for a Ruby interpreter that
right.
is or isn't JRuby. Doesn't seem great because
And
people
that-
could just have interpreting around others.
That was my best guess. I mean, like, if you think about it from the Syft side, it would be like, hey, find the interpreter, find all gems, and put a relationship between them. When you get to the Grype side, you can start to reason about, does this interpreter really with the claims on the vuln data? But then it kind of falls short for me on that last part. Like, even if I had perfect information about the interpreter, I knew it was JRuby versus C, then I don't think there's anything on this package, so like this particular CVE, that would say, does the target software indicate it somehow? I think it just says Ruby. Yeah, so it's not enough information.
Right. I wonder the hyphen Java in the version.gem spec. They're pointing out that hyphen Java means it's the platform is JRuby, right? This could be hyphen x86-64 if it was CRuby, and that would be the architecture that the CRuby was compiled for, I think. The other route we could go is if there are native extensions, we could try to find them. Extensions are like, especially if we're scanning an image where the gems are installed and the dependency is not just declared, to find like the shared object file or DLL or whatever of them, and we'd find a jar in the case of JRuby. So that would be another way to try to do it. I don't know if there's a good heuristic for figuring out that a random binary is Ruby native extensions. There might be though, because the Ruby interpreter has to be able to, like, there has to be a place where it hooks into the interpreter or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, I think this one I think the Python folks are that is the Python Software Foundation are looking into packaging manifests of native dependencies with Python packages because they recognize that some Python packages are just a pile of C or Rust with a little bit of Python gluing it together, and that having an SBOM for the C and Rust is important for licensing and security considerations. I don't know whether Ruby's doing that. They certainly weren't doing it in Ruby 1.8.6 if we're looking at. Okay.
Well, so
Anything else to do here?
I mean, but I think the TLDR is like, so we probably do have some heuristics on the packaging side to do something with this, but there's still nothing on the vuln side to connect it together. Is that still, that seems like that's the conclusion.
Yeah, I wonder, how would you all feel about trying to add, taking our usual line that we want the most correct and complete data in the SBOM we can possibly find, and then Grype will learn to take advantage of it as new data sets become available. What would you all think about trying to update the Ruby gem metadata to include some notion of what platform it's targeting and what native extensions might be present? That'd be interesting. Even just a list of DLLs and looks like there's some native extensions compiled for ARM64 at these paths kind of a note on the gem package metadata. It might be worth having in the SBOM. I don't know. I agree that there's nothing machine readable about the CVE that says doesn't affect JRuby. So it wouldn't help this case, but it might be worth trying to get that additional information into Syft. What do you all think?
I was searching here on the NVD CPE list to see anything about JRuby. It does have JRuby CPEs that are JRuby dash something like OpenSSL. I wonder if we could assume something like we would see a JRuby CPE for those things. I really just don't know.
Yeah, I think that, but the default assumption with a CVE against a Ruby package is that, I think for the interpreter, right? So that's an interesting, that's a really interesting CPE. But this is so this looks like it's the JRuby OpenSSL implementation has some vulnerabilities, or at least has a CPE, so you can report vulnerabilities against it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that the default assumption, right, if we find a Ruby package, is that the bug is in Ruby code and will be exhibited by any correct Ruby interpreter, right? If there's if active record is missing an auth check before updating the database or something, that doesn't matter what Ruby interpreter is running that. That's a hypothetical example. I don't know of any particular active record problems off the top of my head. But it's interesting. And then if there's a bug in the interpreter, then we would expect that only to affect that particular interpreter. So we might get CPEA Ruby Ruby or CPEA JRuby. And those make sense. But then the native extensions are hard because they're kind of not their own package. And I think in a perfect world, people might be using the target platform field to say the normal Ruby interpreter versus the JRuby interpreter, the target software, or this gem is only vulnerable on this language version or something using that field. But I don't know. I think maybe there's a small enhancement to Syft possible that would help. Those paths do look kind of JRuby-ish.
Which paths?
If you look at information inside the container.
That right there. Yeah.
Yeah, those paths kind of scream JRuby pretty loud, but again, there's nothing on the CVE that screams JRuby is not affected unless you go read the human readable text. And even then, I think it's mostly just failing to mention that Java is affected. Maybe it's a very C specific bug, like use after free or something. But anyway,
But I agree with, I mean, popping back a sec to what you're saying. I definitely agree on squeezing the sponge as much out of the Syft to make certain it can portray what we think a platform that this is representing in that metadata. In terms of like other executables, I think that's already included. It's not on the package. So today we scan like for all packages, but we also scan for all owned files as well as any executables we find. And any executables we find end up in the files section. And so if you end up having a package that claims ownership for a file and that file happens to be an executable, there's going to be an executable section on the file node in the SBOM. So actually, we do have some indication for executables like ELF, DLLs, Darwin, etc. It's Mako, but I don't think we'd have anything for like say a jar. And actually, I don't know enough about like JRuby, like gems. If like, are they encapsulating jars directly? Are they encapsulating like raw class files? Like this is where I kind of go, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we had a false positive a while ago that involved like nokogiri.jar. Like somebody was running nokogiri on JRuby and it brought a jar in, and so it was sort of a similar discussion. So I think that when you need native extensions on JRuby, you run a jar and ship a jar, but I don't know. This probably needs more investigation. Maybe we should throw needs investigation on it and a little comment like sort of summarizing this and then move on. Does that seem like where we're at?
Yeah, and probably open up that issue in the Syft that says, hey, and try to indicate platform for gems when you can. And platform is a bit of a, I mean, that's not even quite right. It's I mean, platform makes it sound like we're talking about like, OS and architecture, but in actuality, we're saying, is it C extension? Like, what's the tool chain? What's the right phrase here?
I think that what I'd really want out of Syft is like, I think they do have platform because a lot of gems have native extensions. And so it'll say like Linux x86 64 in it, and so that is a platform.
That's true. Well, yeah, but it's a platform that doesn't indicate Java versus like C native.
I think it does
It
because
implies
it's
C
telling
native, I
you
guess.
right. It implies C native. It's saying like build the native extensions for Linux x86 64 or build the native extensions for Java, which presumably is a different set of source code. But
weird. So then in theory, Python's got the same enhancement we can make. I mean, so if we're talking about writing an issue that's kind of a higher level issue that covers like, hey, you just want to cover like native extensions versus other kinds of extensions.
Yeah,
there is Python.
Yeah. What if okay, so what, maybe just a Syft issue that says like investigate capturing metadata about interpreted language native extensions.
I think so. Yeah.
C code that's part of a Ruby gem, for example. C code that's part of a PyPy package, for example.
Yeah, because for what Keith's saying, it sounds like we might have a guess downstream in Grype on what to do about it. But like I think it's still to be proven out, and like I think for every ecosystem it's going to be a little different. But yeah, I agree with Will what you're saying. Let's squeeze a sponge on Syft and get that issue written, as well as put needs investigation for this particular one because we have more questions. So
for things like this, I mean, this would be really useful to have input from people in the community. Do we have any? I mean, I'm guessing if somebody knew a contact, they would probably have mentioned it, but is there some way that we might typically be able to like pose this question to communities and see if like somebody might be able to respond to them? I mean, beyond just like, me going into some chat room or whatever, right, and trying to figure it out myself.
So far, that's all we got.
Yeah.
I mean,
jruby.org/community.
build relationships with people who use Syft and Grype and ask them questions when stuff goes wrong. Yeah.
So far, all I got is the JRuby community's official chat group in Matrix.
So the outcome is some notes on here. We've got it. This needs investigation. Is someone going to follow up on?
Yeah, it looks like the issue we want is already sort of open. I dropped a link in the chat to Syft
Oh, really?
2877.
Oh, thanks.
Oh,
I keep
see.
losing the chat window. Sorry.
So right, which this came in as a bug report where we found a jar called Nokogiri, which Nokogiri is like a Ruby wrapper around WebXML to do like a bunch of HTML stuff. At least the last time I did Rails, if you did bundle install on Rails, you had to watch Nokogiri build its native extensions for a long time because I think it was compiling WebXML for your platform or something.
Interesting.
Right. So Josh's contention is just that we have a bug in Syft because doing gem install Nokogiri on JRuby downloaded this jar, which is the native extensions of the Ruby gem Nokogiri when you're running under JRuby, and that it shouldn't be reported as a separate package. And then there's some additional discussion, and the last comment is me saying this is just needs investigation. Somebody needs to go figure out how to report metadata on native extensions, which I think is a lot like the conclusion we just reached here.
Well, this is kind of fun because this is like two things in one. Okay, so like, let me ask a different question. There's still a gem spec for this, right?
Yeah, I think there's a gem. Actually, somebody posted simple Syft output early in this issue where we find a jar and a gem of the same name.
Yeah. I mean, that's when it gets fun, right? Because like, so I like, we need to be able to, we have these two other catalogers that are independent, and they are rightly so going off and independently doing what they need to, find gems, find jars. But like, we have this third case where it's like, no, I've got a gem that contains a jar, and being able to dedupe and say, okay, which is the parent package here? So here we should have deferred to the gem,
Right.
Because one's contained within the other, as opposed to saying, but we also don't want to lose all that rich metadata that we've collected from the Java cataloger. So Keith and I had some discussions on this a few weeks back about, hey, I want to be able, so right now the metadata field on the package is singular, but what if we want to describe multiple things there, like some pluralized form, or I can say, oh yeah, well, I have this one logical Nokogiri package. Here's the gem spec in the metadata section, but here's also like the Java archive. And so we don't need to lose any of that information. It's still all very useful, but we don't have a way to do that today. And some of the things that we talked about was, having a join type there where it's like, I can, basically have a slice of any in metadata and be able to put on as many things as I want there. There's like more that needs to be designed there. We don't know if we love the idea, et cetera, but I mean, this kind of thing would allow us to merge two packages like that and not have to drop a ton of information or introduce a brand new type that just wraps it for like the special case of Ruby gems that are for JRuby. This one's fun.
Yeah, so this seems interesting. And I think this is a good enough like issue to have. I might relabel it as feature and say like, Syft should capture native extensions, or I might even say FFI extensions of Ruby and Python packages, something like that.
Yeah.
But Anyway, this
It's
is
gonna
the
be
issue.
fun.
I was going to go right. I found it. I don't need to. I don't want to write another one because it'll just be this, but without context and specifics.
Sweet.
Yeah, no, I like it. Thank you.
Cool. All right.
That was easy.
Yeah, I think the thing that we want to like recast this thing as, like, if maybe you just give some examples across multiple ecosystems about what this would look like and how we would
Yeah.
want that to manifest in the SBOM.
That
That
makes
would be the
sense.
most, yeah, that'd be the most helpful to kind of usher this issue forward design wise.
Yeah. Okay. It looks like there was a needs discussion PR. Did I make that up on the last screen? If we hit back for just a second.
Did I close it? No, I closed it.
No, you
It's not-
had the needs discussion right here. There's a pull request on the left.
There. This one.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know who added needs discussion, but it has needs discussion.
Oh gosh.
Quite possibly I did.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes, you did. Right. What is this? This is
an interesting one.
they're all
so
interesting, Keith.
This user, they want to scan. I don't really know why. Still haven't figured out why, but they want to scan test binaries. So when you run tests in Go, it builds a binary and executes it, I believe. And they want to scan those. I don't really understand why, but I mean,
There's the Go test -C, which is how you can compile these binaries. Actually, that's which it takes all build flags that Go build does as well. But yeah, like whenever you're doing, like for instance, if you're running tests in GoLand, like that's actually what it's doing under the hood, such that it could nicely debug with a known binary. So at first it gets that binary in a controlled fashion with like Go test -C out of Go as opposed to just doing Go test. And yeah, so like in theory, like it's useful to know. Yeah, I agree with I don't know what the use case is. I can make a bunch of guesses.
so I think the thing here is that, like, at least when I was reviewing this, which admittedly was some time ago now, the way that it was determining the dependencies was
Unique.
it didn't seem like it was going to give a particularly good result to me, and I don't know, it looks like it's probably had some changes since then, so I could be speaking about an old thing, but
No, I mean, if I remember right, this is looking at all of the symbols and trying to make a determination like, oh, this is coming from a new distinct package based off of the string we find, therefore claim this as a dependency. Is that right?
something along those lines, right? And then, but it's using like some amount of like the source code, and like maybe a vendor dir, or maybe like the Go modules directory, and like there are a lot of different, like all of that seems like it's not going to give a great answer for what's actually in this test executable that they're looking for. And,
Oh yeah, you're right.
and what is like actually a test. Like one of the things that they're trying to do, I think, is like label some dependencies as test dependencies. And like, I think what would it be happening is like, it's going to label all the dependencies as test dependencies, even though a lot of the things that it pulls in are actually like real dependencies in the normal program. So like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I don't know, I guess I was kind of like just curious what people's thoughts were, and if like anybody had any ideas that like might make this work well, that we could say, oh yeah, this is like an approach that if you did this, we can, move forward with, or any of those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, this. Okay, actually, I have a question. Where is this being put underneath the cataloger that is an image cataloger? Or is it purely a directory cataloger? I'm trying to figure that out now. looks like it's under scan binary, so it's the parse go binary stuff. So that's used for as an image and directory scans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think step one, because this is using the Go tools packages package, so that, like you said, that's using a bunch of external things. That's using the host system. And so if we were to call this function, and in the context of an image, it would be populating a Go mod directory, or really searching a Go mod cache directory. I don't know if it populates things that don't exist, but that's kind of breaking the rule of thumb for an image scan. But for a directory scan, that makes a ton of sense, right? You're on the build system. You just want to get information about what you just built. Whereas for an image, like, all that stuff's gone, and you have no guarantees that any of that information is still there. So I think, like, step one is, like, this is its own cataloger already. Does that actually help the situation some? Does that make it worse? Meaning, like, this being the fact that this is not accurately coming up with answers. If this cataloger is maybe deselected or not used when we do have the right information, or if we're doing an image scan, for instance, this becomes less of an issue.
Or like the SBOM cataloger, you have to opt in to use it, right? So
Yeah.
people wouldn't start getting things that seemed like potentially wrong results by default. And if they really needed to use this feature, they could just, opt into it and scan the thing they need for that usage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. It definitely was a few weeks ago, and in our world, a few weeks is like an eternity in terms of loading up the context of all of the things that the reasons I marked it as good to discuss. So,
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, this is kind of weird, right? Because what if you're scanning a directory that has a mix of Go test binaries and not Go test binaries? And that's assuming a perfect world if I'm able to strongly detect the difference between those two things. Because ideally, you only want to be able to select, like, Go test binaries with this cataloger. So, like, we're already assuming a bit of a refactor here. The reason being, like, we really, if this cataloger is making guesses, then we really don't want to accidentally select it when there's an actual Go binary, like just a typical application. Actually, do we have a sense for that already? Is this PR able to detect and filter out cases, being able to truly detect, this is a Go test binary, this is not a Go test binary. Hot dog, not a hot dog test. So
unclear.
yeah, that's another big thing on this PR. Then I feel like we can get to what you're asking, which is like the accuracy of this. And yeah, I mean, this actually, I kind of wish Chris was here. He's been using this packages load call for the Go. There's another Go source cataloger that he's implementing. So it's going to functionally replace our Go mod cataloger, where we look at the Go mod file, and instead is going to be looking at a source tree and using this packages.load to reason about, the details are still in flight, but essentially, given a entry point, or being able to detect an entry point for a source tree, what will be the packages that are needed at runtime? Thus, it would prune test packages automatically. Now, this function call, though, is got a lot of caveats. The more you load up onto that packages config, for instance, that's listed here, like, you could say, I need all these different modes. I need imports, I need names, I need etc. And they have another, like, 20 options that you could put there. It takes longer and it does more crawling in order to find those answers. So it's, like, really important to get the right values in how you use this call. But
All right, so I think if I could, like, summarize at least a couple things, we're thinking this should probably be its own cataloger, probably be disabled by default, so we can like isolate usage of it.
Maybe it doesn't have to be that last part. If there was a assured test for knowing when a binary was a test binary, then we wouldn't have to have it off by default.
Right. Okay. I'll see if I can do something to help.
I was just looking at that part in the PR. It's I don't know enough about it, but there's definitely something that's trying to make that assertion strongly, right? The default is it's not a test binary. Only if you can get the symbol info from the binary does it trigger it's a test binary. By looking at
and
headers,
and that's a pretty maybe that might be a good enough guess. Because so you're saying like they're talking about like the build info section. If there's a build info section, then there's strong indication that it's not a test binary. If there is no build info section, then we use the sim tab. Thus, this is a test binary. Is that?
It seems like I shouldn't say authoritatively. I don't know. I don't quite know enough about it, but I'm just looking at the PR now. Yeah, it's basically elf.new file and then elf.symbols. So if there are symbols, it looks like that's what triggered it.
Yeah, the pro. I mean, that brings up a whole other thing too. I don't know if it's worth double clicking on, but like, does the current working directory matter for when you run this? So I actually need to go learn more about that package's load function. If it's using mod information from the current directory or if it's not. Because I was about to say for Dan, what you were saying, like maybe that is just a good enough of a determination between these two kinds of binaries, because we would even start getting package information, whether it be accurate or not is in question, in cases where it's not a test binary, but folks have stripped everything they possibly could out of the binary, including the build info section. So this would actually be like a nice feature add, so to speak, even outside of this test binary case. But I don't know. For me, it's all also coming back to this understanding of the package's load command. Like, do we need like a go mod in that directory? Will that still function? Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns with this one. Yeah, Keith, this is a gnarly one. I think we have, I think we have a conclusion in that, like, we need to go, A, learn more about packages.load, B, split this up into two catalogers, and maybe C, check in with what Chris is doing with his new Go source cataloger. It could be that there is what's being done here and what he's doing would actually be part of the same cataloger. I don't know if that part's true, but if they're both reasoning about source trees, it seems like it could be true. So, anybody got anything else?
We think Keith is now equipped to continue reviewing this or provide feedback to the... Good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. Good discussion. Well done, chaps. That was the only pull request that was in needs discussion. We have... wrong button. That button. We have a few minutes left. Do you want to grab something and triage it? What do we think? That one looks interesting.
I did respond to that one.
You have you? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is Syft 3942. I'll paste it in there anyway, just to see if there's something we can do with this. Running Syft on the file system went from taking less than 5 minutes to taking 36 hours. Whoopsie. Yeah,
Definitely.
we don't have oh, look at that. That's a lovely retro color scheme they've got there.
Oh, yeah, that's a pretty good guess, Keith.
Yeah, I looked at the, they were pretty specific about the versions. It looked like they, did some due diligence testing to find the right thing. And so like, this is the only thing that looked like it was changed in this particular cataloger, which, looking at what they posted above, they have 33,000 executables. So sounds like something about that is probably,
Oh, right, yes.
getting reported here in a weird way that's not doing quite the right thing.
So we're saying, like, maybe Syft is spending some time saying, like, this executable is not the Grub VM, and this executable is that, or
Yeah, well, so there's something that PR, it added something where to report unknowns about the Graal VM people, like the Graal VM executables not having SBOMs, and it's probably doing it for everybody. It's like something's probably happening where it's like reporting them for all of the executables instead of just the specific VM ones.
I see.
But
So
yeah,
right. So a Grail VM, a Grail VM like built artifact might have an SBOM in the binary, and we're now reporting this binary doesn't have a Grail VM SBOM for binaries that aren't Grail VM. Is that what you're thinking?
that's what I'm guessing
Yeah.
probably happening, just given the fact that they had 33,000 executables. It looks like something sort of like that is happening here. That would just be my guess, but it definitely needs a little more digging into.
Certainly sounds plausible, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting. Okay.
or they have a bunch of GraalVM images that they didn't, or GraalVM executables here. It probably is one of those two, right?
Yeah.
So and just to connect, like, and just to finish out the thought, like the unknown join. Is it the specifically unknown.join here, where we say like, oh, I've technically got like an error wrap for like 33,000 things.
Right. And
Yeah,
does a
that's
little bit of
bad.
stuff that sort of, to try to reduce the number of errors in an efficient way. But I mean, it does involve iterating over things. So if you have 33,000 things and you're sort of doing that a bunch of times, then it's, yeah, I could see that being slow.
This actually, I think I've got a sub discussion topic on this one. Like, so this is a Syft 2.0, and really, I should say things we want to introduce before Syft 2.0 as new patterns before we hit that. And when we did the unknowns work, we essentially said, hey, we want this information, but the interface for catalogers really can't be broken at this point in time. So we're already in Syft 1.0. And since then, we've also had this other proposal of like, well, I want to be able to write intermediate results out to disk and not have it in memory, which also kind of, strongly hints that this interface needs to be changed dramatically. And the solution that the last we chatted about was have like an SBOM writer interface where like whatever the artifact is, like new package, new relationship. In this case, it would be new unknown. We would want to like pass that to a writer, and the writer kind of immediately gets rid of it and stores it wherever it needs to be stored. It could be on disk, could be in memory, it doesn't necessarily matter for this conversation, but it would eliminate the need to do error wrapping for this stuff. It's no longer an error, it's just another kind of artifact. So, and we think that's where the performance like issue is. It's on error wraps here. This is not like a great, like error wraps work great if you have tens of things. It does not work great if you have things. So, so.
Are we missing something? Sorry to interrupt. Are we missing something in the quality gate? Are we missing like additional tests, like certain types of images, or are we just like, we're going to put one of those in and we'll never see it again, and then somebody else will come along with something else that's weird and like, esoteric, and we'll have to put a test in for that, and then we'll just end up with 1,000 tests forever to run and loads of use cases that like only one person on the planet ever has?
We actually don't have the ability to make test fixtures for GraalVM native images with SBOMs because it's gets a paid platform or paid JDK
Feature, yeah.
Oracle JDK. Yeah, I don't have the intricacies, but it's like it's behind a paywall. So that was one thing when getting the first contribution for the native image embedded SBOMs, we're like, hey, we're just missing a test. And they said, well, we can kind of mock a couple of these things, but getting a true integration test here is going to be very challenging. And once they, yep, gotcha. So it's like agreed in terms of like having a case for this. And I think even if we did, we was probably missing out on this of having tens of thousands of these sitting around. We probably would have just had one or two, and it would have been fine to pass benchmark test, for instance.
Right.
Yeah. Does he say anything, or did they say anything about the difference between the SBOMs? Like,
what the size of them and what's inside them? I don't think.
Right. I mean, they're showing the complaint is like the timing, right? The timing got a lot worse, but did the file get a lot bigger? Right. Anyway, I think this is worth like following forward, right? If we have a cataloger that's on by default, that's like sometimes really slowing people down, should this skip the line and get picked up soon?
Probably so. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
But to answer your question, I don't think the SBOM is getting any larger. Looking at like the 2E output here, it's the same packages, files, location counts, and executables. I think it really is just time.
But do we?
And yeah.
Okay.
But I agree with what you're saying. This should probably cut the line.
There may be, I mean, there could be something about unknowns being reported differently, but generally by default, the executables get marked with an unknown if they haven't found a package found. So it's maybe like one message instead of a different message or something that they would see. Like with the SBOM itself, like it probably wouldn't change dramatically, I think.
Actually, maybe we should have never merged this to begin with, because shouldn't there have already been an unknown, because this is an executable format?
Well, so the PR that, as I understood, the goal of the PR was indicate this is a GraalVM executable
Messaging,
and it doesn't have an SBOM. I'm looking for an SBOM and it doesn't have one. And so it would have been marked as no packages found or something instead of that particular detail, which I thought was a useful change, but obviously not at the expense of 3 to 6 hours worth of processing time.
I think this is I think we should just revert this then if we think we already have this covered as an unknown. And that would be the fix. Unless anybody's got any other ideas or we want to take more time with it.
Well, I mean, I would be surprised if there are 33,000 GraalVM executables that we're looking at. My working theory, without having dug into it much at all, is just that it's being reported for the wrong things in that cataloger, and there's probably something that like we could just tweak where it's being reported to only report actual GraalVM executables, and then everything would be fine. That's my gut feeling, but
I'll ask the obvious question: what is the difference between? Because I mean, all is just ELF, Mako, PE files. I mean, so what is the difference between a PE and a GraalVM PE, and same thing for ELF and Mako? Like, other than the present SBOM, is there anything else?
Well, I mean, I think it has like some, not that we're detecting anything else, but I think it does have some like Java runtime in it. I mean, it's basically, Java turned into an executable, like a high performance compacted executable.
So the compiler might have written down, right? I mean, like on some level, a Go executable is just a binary compiled from Go is just a platform native executable that happens to statically link the Go standard library and runtime and all that stuff. So,
right, but that's like the hard way, right? Because the easy way is we look at the build info section. It's just a string that says, it looks like kind of like a Go mod file. And that's kind of what I'm asking. Is there like an easy way where, kind of like the same thing as a build info section for Go?
Yeah, and I think that's part with some of the artifacts being proprietary. I think it's
Subtle hint. We are out of time.
You should just hang up on us. That's all you should do.
Yeah, and you not know. Yes. So I guess this is going to be picked up by someone soon.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, definitely. I mean, any takers? I could always take it on if nobody else
The
wants
last person to comment was Keith. So
Yeah, I guess
the rules are.
it. Performance things do you want at once?
All of
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
I'll leave that as a mystery for people to find out when they follow this issue later. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Bits of good info in there, and have a great rest of your week and weekend. And we'll see you all next time for another one of these. Thanks, chaps. See you later.
Thanks, all. See you soon.
Ta-da.
Cheers.
Bye.